So we'll change now the perspective and talk from the point of view of the repositories. And I will first talk a little bit about some of the incentives in data sharing that are needed in order to, for researchers to be able to want to make the data accessible, whether there are requirements or non-requirements to make it so. And then I'll talk about the actual solutions that we've been providing with the Dataverse repository to implement those data policies and data sharing incentives. So, sorry, I want to make sure. So first of all, independent of requirements that funders or publishers have, like we've seen from Springer Nature and PLOS, that have for data sharing, the scientific communities themselves have been organizing, mobilizing in the last few years to want to follow best practices in their own research, in part because a problem, well, that they've been seeing a lot of problems with reproducibility of some of the results that have been published within the community, and they want to make a difference by providing more transparency in not only making data accessible, but making code accessible and transparency in the methods that they use for the analysis. This has been, can be seen with groups like, for example, the Data Access and Research Transparency, DART, that is mostly for social science, and the political science community started that. The Transparency and Openness Promotion, the top guidelines that the Center for Open Science has defined, and it's, well, the psychology community has also embraced, and others. And then also another example is the Coalition for Publishing Data in the Earth and Space Science, or COPDES. And those are not the only ones, but some of the examples. And how that has been translating also into the adoption of data policies across different disciplines is, it's showed in this, well, this review that we've done, that it's going to be in a publication soon, of the data policies by journals in different fields. So in general, the biomedical community has been at the front, basically, of providing strong, both weak and strong data policies in their journals for data sharing. When I say weak, I just mean that the policy says we recommend that you share your data. When they say strong, is that the journal requires that you make your data available. Computational science is actually, it's sort of behind that, and at 15-20% of the journals that provide this. These are all from different papers and that looked at what was happening in that community. The economics community also has some data policies, but are not very, very strong, and the strong is only at 5% or so. And you see also the example of ecology. This is not all the disciplines, but it's just an example of how it varies and how the biomedical community has been in front of that. We also see with some of the studies that look at for example, here in social science, for top social science journals, that when you require it, it is followed. And I mean, you would expect that to be the case, but strong data policies do pay off, and you see that in this case, 80 to 90% of the articles do provide the data, made it accessible when they require that. And it's much harder. It gets to 35 or so when you have a weak data policy that you just recommend to make the data accessible. There's also been mobilization in, especially here, the psychology community, because of a lot of the talk about replication crisis in psychology results, scientific results, to provide guidelines, very accurate, very detailed guidelines for authors to not only make the data open, but also provide more information, more reporting on the statistics, and in particular, for example, defining the confidence interval when they provide statistics and the results of the in the papers, in the articles. And you see that in the last few years, from 2013 to 2015, well, as is shown in this paper here, that and the results that it goes, well, for example, for the confidence interval reporting, it goes from 28% to 70% by just having the guidelines for authors in the journal. And also that for availability to open data, it grew from 3% to 39% in 2 or 3 years also, just by providing these guidelines to authors. Another one of the work that have been done related to conducting best practices for data sharing, and also follow data citation, the data citation principles that had been established by the 411, and also followed by a group that it's the BioCADI research group funded by NIH, that has created a data what they call the data citation implementation pilot. So as a result of that, they show how a very practical roadmap. If you look in this article, that is a preprint in bioRxiv. It's a very practical roadmap for how to provide guidance to your authors in the journal in different phases, before publication, during production, and during submission, production, and publication. And they say that the preference is that you add the data citation into the reference list of the journal. So it's not enough to just say, to indicate here someplace in the text of the article, say here's the data is accessible, or have some statement where the data can be found. But it actually should be, for providing the strongest incentives to make that the data accessible, providing the data citation with a persistent identifier like a DOI, and so in the reference list is what will make a bigger impact. So this, again, I find it a very useful set of recommendations if you want to go through that. But that's a little bit more complicated, providing a data citation, than just saying here the data. The publication of data has the same authors as the publication of the article. So sometimes, that's not the case, and if what we want is to incentivize data sharing, we need to provide credit to the right, data, to the actual data generators, the contributors, to make that data, to collect the data, make it curated, and make it accessible. So this is one of the discussions that maybe we could have later in the Q&A. But it's just that also when you provide data citation, who is that gets the credit, right? So what have we been doing in Dataverse to help with all the things, to implement these data policies and to provide incentives for researchers to share the data? So first of all, for those who don't know much about Dataverse, Dataverse is an open source project that allows you to build a data repository, any type of data repository. There are data repositories that use the Dataverse software around the world, and sometimes they use it as an institutional data repository, and sometimes it's a data repository for a specific community. I will talk here in particular about the Harvard Dataverse repository, which is open to any researchers, any journal to be able to share the data, publish it there, to some extent self-curated at the metadata that they want for the data set, and by that it generates automatically a data citation with the DOI and with all the authors' information, giving again credit to those that contributed to the data set, and with all the metadata standards supported for that data set. So how does Dataverse support journals? So there are different ways that the Dataverse repository, and in particular Harvard Dataverse, works with journals. One is that you could simply, as a publisher or journal, recommend Harvard Dataverse as one of the repositories, like Springer Nature and PLOS would do for not only Dataverse, but for Dryer and for others, and Figshare and so. The other thing is that if you want to manage more accurately the data sets that is associated with your journal, you can create a journal Dataverse, which would mean that now within Harvard Dataverse, you create your own virtual repository, and you ask the authors to submit the data in that repository in your journal Dataverse. I will show you an example in a moment. We have about 160 journal Dataverses in Harvard Dataverse, and each one of that, the journal editors would administrate or would be able to manage the data sets there, be able to provide, review what goes in and when it gets published. It can get published before or after the article is published. And to make sure also that there is the link that goes from the article to the data set in the repository, and from the data set back to the article as the publication that is associated with that data set. Just to clarify, for Harvard Dataverse, there are about 70,000 data sets. Not all of them are associated with a journal article. Sometimes researchers just to follow best practices for the community, they will just publish the data set, and it's not necessarily yet associated, it's just a data set that we want to make available to others, to the collaborators, and they could restrict the actual data, but at least the metadata is public and can be found by others. The same way that as we work with some foundations like the Gates Foundations that ask the grantees to deposit the data in Dataverse provide open data, to support the open data policies, and also to help with reproducibility of the results from the research that is done in Gates, in the Gates Foundation. One third way that Dataverse supports journals is also integrating at a systems level, so that the journal system that a publisher would use could use the API, the application programming interface that Dataverse provides to deposit data to Dataverse as part of the submission process of an article. Ian showed us an example of this type of integration with Figshare. So this is similar to what also is a Dataverse repository you could do. Then in terms of providing different reviews or levels or tiers of data review, one possibility is that you grant the reviewers of the article permission to access the data set before in the Dataverse repository before that data set is published, is available to or released to the public, right? Another way is just providing, submitting a link that it's a private link or anonymous link that the reviewers can use to access the data set, be able to review it, and so before, while they're reviewing the article. And a third way that is much more extensive review, and it's done only for a few journals, at least that we know, is a full replication review, so that the data set and code goes into all the data, the data files and the code files goes into a data set in Dataverse, and by the journal uses a third party to review that all the code works with the data, and it replicates all the figures and all the results in the paper. I will show in a moment an example of that. Here's for the American Journal of Political Science. You can see that, the first screenshot is the journal page and the article published in that journal. That article has a citation to the data set, and so it is a persistent link to the data set in the journal Dataverse, in the repository. The journal Dataverse can be customized as your journal, so it looks as it's part of the journal. And there you can find all the data and in this case, even the code associated with that article, right? And you have the citation, as I said, back and forth. So from the article to the data, and from the data to the article. And this is an important characteristic of connecting data articles in journals with data sets in public repositories. So for this case, AJPS have used the Odom Institute at the University of North Carolina as a third party to review the data that comes with every article and make sure that all the results replicate. As I said, I think only 2 or 3 of the journals that we support are doing this. It's not, I mean, even though depositing data at Harvard Dataverse is free, this is not a free service, the replication review, and it's not well, they're finding out the Odom Institute that it's not cheap and it's very time consuming, as you would expect it, and we're looking at ways to automate or make it or facilitate with options like I see here CodeOcean, for example. There are some different options that would help to execute the code automatically and see if it replicates and facilitate that review. But as of now, what they've seen is that they had well, for 8 cases that they didn't need to resubmit, that they didn't need to ask for more information about the data and the code. This is of 95 complete verifications, right? 37 cases that they need to at least resubmit one. 31 cases that they need to resubmit twice, so they ask for more information about the data and the code, but it's not yet enough to replicate. And as you see, it goes down and down. I mean, it just shows us, we would expect, again, this keeps going, that replication is not simple, even when there are the best intentions from everybody to try to make it happen, right? But there is a benefit at the end that you have an article with data and code, and you know that, that the results provided in the article are actually have been verified. So I will end with that, and I would say in terms of data policies for journals, what I usually say is that at least recommend data sharing policies, that for the data to be shared, if you can require it. We've seen how some of studies show that when you require, there is authors follow that, and it pays off. And if you dare, review and replicate, which takes a lot of time and cost, but probably will get cheaper over time too if we use automated tools. Thank you.